I think we're about the same
Hi.
size, right?
Yeah, and the
Welcome to my kitchen.
coffee's on the way, and the kitchen looks spick and span.
It does. And a
A lovely place to be.
nice coffee machine in the background. Now we just need someone to walk behind us and make us a coffee. So Louise, do you want to introduce yourself? Because then at least we'll have that.
Of course, yeah. So my name's Louise Ward, and Sarah and I are connected through behavioral science in various different sort of tentacles of connection, which is that we have a great interest in nudge stock. Sarah was supportive at the outset when I set up a group after nudge stock with Behavioral Science Club, and we meet every week. And then our third connection, Sarah, is that I'm now working with a company called 42 Courses, an online e-learning company. And Sarah, like myself, has done several of the courses.
That's right.
With 42 Courses. So we have many connections, and whenever we're talking, we then find many more connections.
And of course, one of my pet loves is doing the Australasian Change Days. And last year, 42 Courses was one of our sponsors, which we were very thankful for. And so I was a fan of 42 Courses before that, and did their behavioural economics course, and also a fan of Nudge Stock. In fact, I wanted to go to Nudge Stock when I was in the UK, when it was a face-to-face event. And then when I came back to Australia, when COVID, not long before COVID started, and then Nudge Talk was virtual, it was great. I was actually able to attend virtually. So yeah, it was really good. I guess
yeah, I think Nudge Talk Ogilvy couldn't have anticipated the interest that would be generated when they went online. So I'm sure they would admit that it was a pleasant surprise, the number of people who registered for the event and the sort of interest that it generated.
And interestingly and similarly, Australasian Change Days launched in 2020, and we were always meant to be a face-to-face event. But obviously launching in 2020 meant that we had to be virtual, or we had to postpone, and I'm really glad we didn't postpone. So it's been an interesting road from that. And I guess the reason I thought it would be good for us to connect was because we're both doing something similar but different, and our experiences might help other people who are doing similar things. So I'm trying to build a community with Australasian Change Days, and I see that as quite different from building an audience or building a mailing list. And some of the things that I've learned about that, about why sometimes you can set up a Slack group or a Discord group or any other group, and it doesn't quite work, I think is because of some of the things that I've learned along the way when I'm setting up my own community. And I don't know about you, but I think one of the main things is around having to have someone host the community, even if everybody is really, really interested in the subject matter. If you don't have a designated person to host it and hold it, then it fades away.
Yeah, I'd really agree with you there, Sarah. We've talked about this subject before, and we've both agreed that the host is like the key person. It's the person who someone can feel they can reach out to. It's the person who's regularly keeping people up to date with what's going on. It's the sort of infuser. It's the infuser of this subject. And the sort of connecting thing that we said went hand in hand with being a host was that really you have to have a sort of inbuilt interest and passion for the subject, because being a host for something you've just been told to host, if it's an ongoing sort of series of events, very hard to drum up enthusiasm for I think our example was bird watching or something
right.
like that. A great thing to be involved with. And I love birds, but I wouldn't be able to manage a group of bird spotters.
Yeah. So I guess that one of the lessons learned is that it has to be hosted, and more importantly than that, it has to be hosted by someone who has an interest or certainly a strong experience perhaps, or wanting to know more about a particular subject area, because we were both fairly new to well, I mean, a psychologist by training, but we're both fairly new to behavioral science as it's being used and talked about today, but we were both enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, and sort of connected with this is we're talking about our own enthusiasm, but the other thing that you can then see is that somebody within the group can become or be equally enthusiastic, and then there's the danger that that person almost takes over the group themselves. So that brings you back to the importance of this role of the host in managing these people, because as you say, it's a community, but a community of people together then develop certain characteristics, one of which can be sort of trying to not exactly take down the leader, but certainly, you know, develop their own sort of importance within the group. So it's a sort of, yeah, it's a second reason for having somebody who's managing the people.
And do you mean that in terms of like dominating the conversation, or do you mean, or because I something I've experienced?
Yeah, so what I'd say is it's a thing that's sort of dependent on your platform. So for example, we've seen many ways in which you can develop these groups, and one of which that we're both familiar with is within LinkedIn. And within LinkedIn, you do have a certain degree of control. You are the person who's managing the group, and you can opt to approve any posts that come up within this group. So that's a very strong control over those people. Anyone who wants to put an article, make a comment, you approve it. What I've seen in other groups, like sort of like Slack groups, is that when they're not managed for postings, somebody potentially can then take over a whole sort of channel and, you know, own it and sort of work for whatever that particular channel's subject is. And it's a fine line between somebody who is just a super group member and suddenly somebody who becomes rather a dominant voice. And almost feels sort of as if it's their personal community.
Yeah, it's interesting because I belong to a few different communities and a few different organizations, and I've got to say that in terms of participation in a well-hosted group, but in terms of participation, I see more participation in these kind of groups that come through a really strong interest area, not a broad interest area, but like a fairly narrow interest area, than I do in paid membership groups. So I, belong to a couple of groups where you pay, they're representative groups for the profession or whatever, and you pay a certain amount each year to be part of that group. And the level of interaction is actually less with a paid group. So I find that quite...
I'm actually not surprised to hear you say that, because I think that comes into the subject that many people might group in things like professional subscriptions. And when you think about how you come about that maybe you're in work and either they say, this is your role, and as part of your role, you will have an annual membership to such and such. Or so, if this is the case, I'm not saying it's foisted upon you, but even though obviously that's a benefit, it's not something I don't know whether it's a sort of a psychological thing, but it's not something you've sort of entered into, achieved yourself. It's been given to you. I think that's very different from, as you say, the other groups.
Yeah.
The best of which are very narrow, as you say. It's like the best specialist shops, isn't it? You have to travel a long way. to get to this specialist shop, and almost the effort and knowing that it's exactly what you want to be talking about without having to explain yourself is the whole attraction.
Yeah. I'm also wondering whether it's that, that discounting that you do, where you kind of you recycle your rubbish, so therefore you can drive a 4-wheel drive. So you're being environmental in one sense, and you're kind of in your head counterbalancing that with something else that's not so environmental.
Yeah, and the other thing I wonder as well is this sort of the idea of, we're always saying, the way people are performing. And who knows, within more of a sort of broad professional group, you might feel you have to perform in a certain way. If I've been signed up to a marketing society group on behalf of my company, within that group, I've always got to perform in my professional role. I've got a responsibility to my company that I am sort of towing the line, giving the right message, representing them. Whereas something I join from my own interest and as myself, you can really, develop then your own passions, and it's your own personality. So I think they're very different bases in which to join a group.
Do you think it's different in virtual than it is in if we weren't doing this virtually?
This is something I've spoken with a lot of. I think it's surprisingly easier, and I think had we talked about it pre-2020, you couldn't have anticipated the benefits that would be gained from it. And yet, as we all launched into it at whatever stage we were at, for myself, it was end of March, beginning of April 2020. I found it really amazingly liberating. And it wasn't anything to do with my work, and it was my own voice and my own interests. And yet, sort of at the base of it, I felt I had my sort of professional training and learning, but it really was an opportunity to develop, as we've said, things with your own interests. But I think the other thing that I'm still not quite sure about why it happened was just everything was so much more friendly. And it might be because we were in our homes. This has been the theory I've put across, and I think most people would agree. It was just seeing people who before you would have sort of, they would have been almost up on a pedestal as being representatives of a professional stage that, however senior you were, they were beyond senior, the really big speakers. And yet there was sort of Brené Brown and Rory Sutherland himself just sitting chatting to us from their couches in their living rooms, and it just made everything have a slightly different feeling about it, just seeing people in their sweats on their couch.
So my community building with Australasian Change Days, and your first one with the Behavioural Book Club, they were started at ground zero. There was nothing in existence, and we have built those communities up. You're now working obviously with 42 courses and inherited a whole lot of warm contacts, for want of a better word, people who've already done the courses, and now you're trying to shift them from only participating in the courses to participating in a community. How's that been different from starting from like a zero base and building up to getting a list of people?
Yeah, that is a really good question, and it's really surprised me. When I went about setting up the group for Nudgestock, and it was immediately after the event, and we decided, oh, let's have a group. When we got about 40 people, like, oh, well, this is great, we have got a group. But how I went about it to start with was a lot of actually just lurking around LinkedIn and seeing the feedback from Nudgestock and then connecting with people who I'd seen chatting and saying we're starting a group, or commenting on their posts and just saying, oh, I recognize your name, or I saw you at Nudge Doc, I see you posted about Nudge Doc, just to let you know we've started a group.
Yeah.
So that's how a lot of the very early members joined us. Now, setting up this new group in a professional capacity brought with it different questions, in that I'd be saying, oh, is this a group that's a sort of like a bonus just for people who have a subscription? Or is this a group that's to be more public so that anyone can join any of our events? But during the event, if we're talking about the 42 courses copywriting course, somebody would say, oh, that sounds really interesting. Yeah. What they're talking about, I don't know what it is, and I want to be in on this. So having an already established product plus an established group of people actually brought more questions in my mind as to how to design this group and what exactly we wanted to do with it, which I'll be absolutely honest with you, I'm still working on the idea and I'm still not quite clear in my mind. I think maybe it's a hybrid of the two, that you do open events. Anyone can jump in on.
Interesting your comment about lurking, and I used and I may well have pinched it from someone else. So if anyone even listens to this and thinks I've pinched their idea, possibly. But quite a few years ago, an example I gave is like when you go to like a cocktail party and you wander around and talk to, if you're an extrovert like me, and talk to lots of different groups. But the first thing you do is you kind of approach them in silence and you listen to the conversation to see if it's a conversation that maybe you'd like to be part of or not. And then you slightly move away if you don't. Or you kind of go, yeah, this is actually a conversation that I have something to add to, or that I'm really interested in. And so you then, after a few minutes, you might add something. And the difference is you just kind of come into a cocktail party and go, I'm here, everyone pay attention to me. And that's quite different. So it's interesting what you were saying about lurking, because it kind of reminded me of the two ways to approach an entrance to a
I really like that example, and we'll have to find out where it's from, because I feel like I'd love to use it myself. It's really lovely, but I think it's actually a very good analogy to use when you're describing a platform like LinkedIn, which has its own sort of form of etiquette, which some people just don't get. But as you say, an interesting conversation can come up in the thread, and very much like that, you can be like, well, this is really interesting. I'm interested in it, but I'm not really sure what they're talking about. I'll go away and research it. Or interesting, I'll find out about this person or this company. Yes. Or as you say, you read it and straight away, it's like, it's going to be something you're going to be you can contribute to, or you want to know what they're talking about, or you want to be part of that. And they're obviously the nicest ones, where you really can get invigorated by the responses. And then, as you say, the sort of the self-broadcasting with possibly no response is often a little bit embarrassing even to see, isn't it, when it comes up.
Everyone goes, yeah, great, you're here.
So that's a very interesting analogy. And the lurking is this is a different sort of direction. I don't want to go off in this direction too much, but just as that saying, that the LinkedIn etiquette is something that just some people just don't seem to get. When your connection request, someone comes to you with a connection request, and part of the request is then this huge big spiel about, this is what I do and I wonder if that's, you're like, well, no, hold on a moment, let's say hello first.
That's right. Let's do the dance.
Yeah. And, some people might sort of mock it, but I think it's extremely important. And it's,
I'm not
I don't know who you are. It's the door-to-door. It's the difference between a door-to-door salesman who just say, you open your door and it's like, oh, whoa, hold on a moment. And somebody who you've had the conversation with and has nurtured you. And then it says, oh, by the way, I saw that you were talking about such and such. That's something that we do, and or even, I don't know, it's interesting. It's always interested me that it's the biggest business platform, and really it is not a sales platform. The best benefit of it is actually coming back to it, the best bit of it is the community.
Absolutely.
People do use it for sales, obviously. I mean, it's huge tools that they have for following up sales things and things like that, but really the best benefit you can get from it is connecting with people who can go on to be genuine good connections, good friends. So it's an interesting platform to me as a community.
So we probably should, I don't know how long we've been going. I didn't think of looking at the clock. But what do you think your top 3 tips then are for hosting a online, if we narrow it to an online community?
Okay, hosting an online community. So number 1, don't volunteer or apply or set yourself up to be a host for a community that you don't have any interest in. And this doesn't necessarily mean applying for a job. It could be somebody within your workplace asks you to do something along this, and it's just be honest and say, it's just not really something that interests me, and I don't think I'd be the best person to make it successful. We both know core how important that is. I mean, that might be the most important thing. I mean, you can sort of go on with the 2s and the 3s. But it's the core important thing, and beyond that, it's just not going to work.
I think, I think you're right, because I think for me, having an interest is really the number 1 thing, because I heard this on one of the behavioral groups podcasts, I think. Someone said the flip around of if you enjoy your work, you'll never have a job in your life, or never work a day in your life, is that if you find something you love, you'll never have a day off in your life. Because I'm constantly on and constantly looking and reading and listening to things, going, that would actually be interesting for this person, or that connects to this. And I think having an interest in it is probably really.
And maybe a second thing would be the sort of the setting of the tone, in that you're a friendly person. I think I'm quite a warm and friendly person, and I think setting the tone at the outset as to how you respond to people who are coming to you to either apply or to join or to have those first conversations, once you've set that initial tone, I think that's very important then to the success of it and the identity of the group. I don't know if you can tell somebody how to do that. That's just inherently who you are.
Although, so for example, we're trying to get people to join our mailing list so that we can give them up to date information about the event as it comes closer. But as people join, I do send a welcome email. But I also, if they're on LinkedIn, I look them up on LinkedIn and I connect with them and thank them for joining the mailing list. So it's an additional thing that I do to make them feel welcome to the community, as opposed to having just signed up on a mailing list.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear you say that, because again, I was going to say some of the other things that are part of a community, you almost can't teach somebody to do it, because they're these sort of inherent things that you just feel are right to do. After an event that we've done, where there might be sort of 50 people during the event, the online event, I might be scribbling their names down, or if somebody makes an interesting comment, and then afterwards I'd send them a message just saying, you know, if it's somebody who hasn't joined the group for a long time, or I'd be like, oh, thanks so much for joining us.
Yes.
Or, oh, I really liked the comment that you made in the thread or something. And I think those sort of very little touches out can be, I don't know quite what the word is. It's like the strength of them is so much more than the effort.
Yes, absolutely.
Just for the sake of you reaching out and just saying, oh, thanks for joining us. It might be nothing more than that. The person receiving that message, it's sort of got double the strength. They're like, oh God, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. And it's such a small thing. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that we've done the last 2 years for Australasian Change Days is because you turn up at a virtual event, you don't get all the bits that you get to at a face-to-face event. So we've sent, if people have given us their home or work address, we've actually sent an envelope with bits in it, like coffee and
lovely.
Tea and
yeah, that's lovely.
And various bits and pieces from local and Indigenous businesses in Australia, and with a thank you note as well, to say thank you for joining us and for your participation, and your participation has meant we've been able to fund this and donate money to that, or whatever it is. And I think people have been really enjoying receiving something physical in the mail, because we actually, it's quite normal.
That's a lovely idea, and it's just making me think of another group that I'm a member of, and the sort of joy of just receiving something like a notebook and a pen pre an event, so that you can all say, oh, I've got my official notebook. We had an excellent online cocktail event, and receiving the equipment pre the event really sort of geared us all up. So surprising how, obviously that's difficult when you're doing global groups. But surprising how fun it is when you can all be like, oh yes, I got the official pen, or in terms of really, you know, cementing the group with this thing that then everyone's got in common. So that's an interesting part of then having the identity and feeling part.
Our first year, the theme was connection, and one of the things that the reason that we probably came up with the idea initially was we thought about how people usually connect, because virtual was still quite new in 2020. And we figured that you connect through your senses. So we sent something that represented each of the senses. So we sent it worldwide. It took a while to get to some places, but everyone received it before the event. But we sent lemon, a lemon mix that is a traditional Aboriginal lemon mix from one of the shops here, and we sent that for smell. And we sent a pencil case made from recycled denim, again by another Aboriginal group, and we sent tea and coffee for taste. So we actually tried to get everything in a sensory way to be representing on joining virtually, but still being able to kind of on camera go, oh, this smells delicious, oh, this tastes fantastic. Can't complain about
a lovely idea
otherwise.
That's a really, really lovely idea. And I suppose, you know, going back to what was our original plan when we started the group after Nudgestock, you know, within book groups, where it's a group, that part of the thing is either you buy your own book or have it sent to you. The token thing, obviously, that's bringing everybody together is to be able to sort of holding up. And that's something you see a lot in LinkedIn, don't you? When people maybe have had a pre-copy of a book, or they're recommending, you know, the showing of the book is very much saying, I've got it. And now, and I don't think you think of it as being, oh, I'm part of this group, but still it is sort of part of that same thing, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I'm the
Putting your
group of
badge.
people who's read this book. So yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that at the start of the conversation, but the actual token item in your hand can hold you together. Yeah, interesting.
Well, this has been great as always. Love talking to you.
You too, Sarah.
I hope this is useful for other people. Otherwise, it's just been great to have a chat.
It has. Lovely to talk to you, Sarah, and maybe we'll develop this and have a chat about something else next week.
That's a good idea. Around the kitchen table.